Send something to her now.
I unplugged my keyboard.
Okay, we are live, and Becky's keyboard does not work. So, hello, America. So I don't know why I am doing the introductions here. I don't necessarily think I should. So, does somebody else want to do the introductions? I mean, I can.
Well, you can. You already started to talk. You might as
All
well
right.
just continue.
I'm
Go for it, Chris.
trying. I know what we're going to talk about, and 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 I just I'm in the top left position of this screen just because I hit the hosty button because I have the external hard drive that's going to store all this stuff. And I do want to say to America that right before the show, um, all three of these wonderful women went to the bathroom at the same time. They did. I'm not saying it means anything. I'm just saying that's the truth of what happened. And I have a beverage here with me that I'm drinking recklessly, knowing I'm going to be on screen for 2 hours
That's
straight.
okay. We have 3 against 1 today. So I think the ball is in our court.
It probably is. It
Wait,
probably
does,
is.
does he count?
No, Dan doesn't count.
Oh boy. I'll lean on him for emotional support. Okay, so this is our fourth episode of Common Ground, and we have Shon and Katie and Becky and me, Chris, a boy, who's probably going to get annihilated today. Um, we there's just so many things to talk about, and the thing that we decided would be an interesting conversation given this particular demographic distribution would be gender equality in America today. Did you see what I called the broadcast on Facebook?
What did you call it?
You have to go look for yourself.
Three
I think
women in one
We're all
room.
going to go check our Facebook now.
check afterwards. You can check out if you want. I think I approved it with Becky. It was sanctioned,
He did.
Here
so
proved
I
it.
think it's the best.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, it's true. Becky pointed it out. There is three of you, so it is appropriate. Motley Crue applies in this.
Girl.
That's right. Very good.
Well, we got an interesting topic today, though, because we're talking about gender inequality.
Mhm.
And I know that Katie found out some very interesting information that I want Katie to kind of start off with that you sent in the text that I thought was interesting with regards to the military and the difference between. I'm gonna just let you take over on that because I thought that that's a good icebreaker to sort of to give a backdrop as to why we even have gender equality and how it still shows up even in 2021 and nobody is doing anything about it.
Interesting. Yes. So Becky posted an article a couple of days ago about women potentially being required to sign up for the selective service. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And my initial thought on that was, typically you ask for something long enough and it will come to you, right? We've kind of reap what we sow. If that's a controversial way to say it, that may be so. But if we're asking for equality, it's going to come with some things that we maybe didn't think about. So I kind of started digging a little bit further, and because somebody else that I was talking to about that topic, and I was just like, hey, like, what are your thoughts on this? And it happened to be a man that I was talking with. So, it was interesting to get his take on it and hearing things like, well, women on the front line, and are they strong enough to perform certain duties or carry certain equipment and things like that, which was one thing. But the next thing that I found is I'm like listening to what he's saying and kind of Googling to find more and more things to kind of support where my thoughts around this was that apparently currently in the U.S., men in the military are provided a stipend to support certain uniform requirements that may go along with their dress blues or whatever it may be. Some of that being a stipend for underwear and shoes, which I thought was interesting in general. Like, I didn't know you could get a stipend for underwear in the military. But then apparently there's litigation pending because women are not provided that same stipend. So when it comes to their uniform requirements, although the military 100% requires that they wear certain shoes and other accessories, they actually have to foot the bill themselves, upwards of $10,000. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. We're going to require women potentially to sign up for the selective service, and yet we aren't even going to provide them with the basic necessities according to what the military requires that I wear.
Wow. Now that's one of those things that just kind of shock the conscience, because it's either one, the information is wrong, two, the information is accurate, and there's some justification for that long ago that makes no sense now, right? Because that's how we get to inequality, period. There was some reason or justification for a difference in treatment that to somebody, powers to be, so to speak, that made sense long time ago, but still carry forth today. Because that seems highly unfair that a woman would be in the military but not get the same stipend for a uniform that a man would get. And they're fighting for us just like the men are doing. Chris?
Well, I was just doing some research on this, and it looks like the Marine Corps has. So there is legislation. First of all, I would agree with you that I think if we were to take some time and go way back to the beginning of this thing, there probably was some genesis in just enlisted human beings getting a stipend for clothing, but in probably 1942 it was all mostly dudes that were in the field, and it was a thing for. I'm sure it made sense within the obviously sexist world that the mid 40s was, right? Or even, but maybe it was a World War I thing. I don't even know. But it clearly makes no sense these days, right? It makes no sense at all. And the Marine Corps agrees with you because it's called the pink tax if you wanted to Google it. And it looks like they got rid of it. And in its place, the U.S. Marine Corps has stopped giving a regular allowance to male soldiers that had been used to buy underwear and replaced it with a stipend for female soldiers to buy dress shoes.
Wow.
Look at Katie's face. What are you reacting because men
Do I
don't
get
get
to
free?
buy a skirt too?
Yeah. Do I? Okay.
Just
Yeah.
wondering.
Right. So, and it's because the dress shoes that I would, if you keep reading the art, I don't know how to post comments in this. It says I can't do it.
Yeah, just hit comments. Just click.
Hit what? I
Are
did
you
that, and then it says can't post comments to Facebook groups. Learn more. It's all
oh,
grayed out. Can you post comments to it?
no,
Are
you're
you
not on.
posting on the StreamYard, the chat with host and other guests?
I mean, I clicked on comments in StreamYard, and then when streaming, yeah, it just doesn't let me do it. We'll figure it out some other time when we're offline. But anyways, if you wanted to Google it, it's the Atlanta Journal Constitution. I just Googled, women
Okay,
don't get
I see a
stipend
Facebook
for underwear.
user that says, "Hey there," so it's there now.
What is?
Comments.
The comments.
Oh, so maybe people can post, but or maybe everything has to go in Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try that. So Control V.
So while Chris is doing that, I do want to well, let's welcome Elliott. Elliott is our guest today. I think Elliott might be more conservative than me, than Katie, than Becky, and maybe Chris. What's going on, Elliott? How are you?
Everything chicken but the bone, and that's chicken right on.
Everything's chicken but the bone. Oh my goodness. Well, we're talking gender inequality, and you came in while we were talking about the military, the pink tax, and so, but there's so many other things that are unequal when it comes to female and males. I want to kind of go through a couple of things just to throw out there and kind of get some thoughts on. I was kind of doing some research, and it says that I'm gonna talk about student loans. Y'all know me; I like talk about student loans because I want them to go away. But they says women comprise 56% of college students, but hold 2/3 of the outstanding student loan debt burden. What you think about that?
You talking to me?
I'm talking to whoever wants to chime in.
56 to 66. So we're debating a 10% difference.
That's huge.
I don't know.
You gotta look at what field men go into and what field women most likely go into. Then you gotta look at the pay difference. Then you gotta look at the overhead. The
Okay.
women have more overhead than men do.
Explain that, Elliott.
Huh?
Explain that.
Like
Talk to us.
just say if a man go to school for industrial technology and he gets a job into a factory and he's making quite a bit amount of money. But just say a lady may go into elementary education or social work or
Mm-hmm.
teaching, then that pay don't it don't like match up to most things men go to school for. So they can't even afford, most people can't even afford to start even paying the student debt back for a long period of time.
Okay, so I have a question. So why is it that why you have women going into these underpaid positions? Why is that? Right?
I
Because
mean,
there's
well,
there's
you
a
gotta
reason for that.
because women they are not physical as strong as men, so they can't really do certain
On the
jobs.
look at all you got to read all the faces, man.
So then on top of
On
that, it's
the average, on
like
the average,
mathematics. Like which one is more strong, male or female in mathematics?
So
okay.
So Elliot actually brings up a good point, although my eyes are bugging out here. Shon knows we like to lift our weights in the morning. So, the strength comment aside, women and men are biologically different, right? I think we all recognize that our bodies can physically do different things. Our bodies physically produce different amounts of different types of hormones. And maybe some of us are left brained versus right brained, but does that equate to why women go in or are more prominent in certain fields like nursing and teaching? Whereas, like, did you know, I read a book about 2 years ago. There, at the time that book was written, and it was written in the late 2010s, there were only 17 female neurosurgeons in the world. 17 females. So, but is that an indicator that females aren't as smart as men? Which I would personally disagree with.
No, I don't mean that.
Okay.
I don't like. You got to go deeper. Like I'm not saying that men are smarter. I'm just saying that if you put a hammer and some pliers and some screws and some wood on the left side, and you put a cookbook or a stethoscope or what else, art or something like that, which one would go left and which one would go right, male or female?
I'll take the wood and the hammer any day. I'm just saying.
But that's you personally. I'm talking
Yeah,
about
it is.
as a group. Which one
Yeah.
would you say would go left or right? As a
I
group,
think
not personally. As a group.
Well, see, what Elliott is getting to is a point that I think is driving this whole entire conversation. It's because that's a stereotype, that's a norm, that's a tradition that creates barriers to women being able to first even believe that they can do more than do certain types of careers. To push themselves or to strive to do something that maybe they thought that only men would do. um, it's amazing to me how in 2021 we still default to some of those traditions, some of those norms, some of those stereotypes. And not only do men like Elliott perpetuate them, not that you're doing it with malice, Elliott, but that us women perpetuate it on ourselves, right?
Well,
Because
I didn't perpetuate
we're
it.
the ones making the choices. Yes, Elliott, what'd you say?
You asked a question about the student debt, so I had to go back. I'm not saying that I think like that today in 2021. We just trying to come up with the statistics. Like, how did the statistics get to where they at? I seen it's a lot of women driving 18 wheelers now. I was turning in my neighborhood a few months back. They building a neighborhood, and I seen a lady driving a bulldozer. So I'm not saying that women can't do it. I'm just saying history shows that women have chosen on themselves certain professions.
Now, is it chosen or been pushed into?
I mean, you got to, I mean, I don't know.
Becky, what do you think?
Some of both.
Well, first of all, I was going to say what I thought the direction Elliot was going, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. What I thought he was trying to point out is you're taking a statistic of right now, and you're saying here, most women hold student loans debt. The point that I thought Elliot was trying to make is, well, that's probably because currently most men are in degrees that land them jobs that pay more than women who are getting degrees that are landing jobs that pay less. So what I think he was trying to say is if there's more men getting, medical degrees to be a doctor and there's more women getting degrees to be a nurse, a doctor pays a lot more than a nurse, so they're going to be able to pay their student debt off faster. I thought that's the point Elliot was trying to make. Correct me if I'm wrong, Elliot,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's what I pretty much, yeah.
I think he was just talking about the statistic itself.
But I want to go behind the statistic now.
Well, the other thing that I was going to add to that, though, is what I would want to know from those numbers is how many of those women are single mothers, or their mothers and their caretakers, or their caretakers of elderly, or or maybe there is, as a generation, more and more women getting college degrees, but and I think it's difficult to take the student loan conversation outside of what happened in 2018. I mean, 2008, sorry, 2008, because for me in particular, that's when I graduated, and that's when the economy crashed. And that's why I had a lot of student loans that I couldn't pay off. Whereas that's different than the generations before me. Like, even if I had graduated 2 years before when I graduated, it was much easier to get like starting out of college, it was easier to get just like a $50,000, $60,000 starter job. Whereas, and I know this because my friends that graduated the year or two before me, those are the kinds of jobs they were getting. Those are the salaries they were getting. And then they were able to start paying their student loans off within the first 2 years that they're in a career. Whereas for me, I graduated in 2008. I wasn't able to land a job for 2 years or so because the economy was, like, my best job opportunity was Chuck E. Cheese. And
after college, you're saying?
After the economy crashed in 2008. My best opportunity was Chuck E. Cheese. And so I said, you know what? And talking about gender equality, the guy that interviewed me was top grade asshat. But anyways, I was like, I'm not going to work for this company, not because it's Chuck E. Cheese and that's beneath me. It was because the guy who interviewed me and just looking at how they did things, I was like, no. Although I did feel a lot like Romy Michelle's high school reunion where she was like in that shoe store and she's like, I have to go. I have to leave. But so I was just like, you know what? My parents are letting me stay at home. So I'm going to just get a job in something that I like to do. I started working for Curves. I started part-time. I went to full-time. I became a manager. I started the call center at my current company. I worked my way up, but I am now at least 5 years behind what I could be making as a salary if I had started off right away. You know, does that make sense? Like if I had
So,
graduated 2 or 3 years before.
so you're saying that it's the crash is why the statistics are leaning heavier for women having more student loans, and has nothing really to do with actual inequality with regards to
No,
getting a job.
I don't think, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think it's difficult to take the student loan conversation and just look at gender, like without keeping in context that student loan ballooned and it was an issue after the economy crashed. Like that's when it started to really be an issue.
I got
So
you.
I don't
Okay, well,
think we
how
can
about
keep
this,
that.
Becky? Let's switch from student loans. What about this statistic? Women make up 67% of workers earning the federal minimum wage. What about the fact that 67% women are earning minimum wage of 7.25, which was put in place back in 2009, compared to men? So, give me something on that one. What's your position on that?
I think I would kind of go back to what I was saying earlier. I think about jobs that are minimum wage, and I think about if you are a woman and you're trying to start a family and you have kids and the cost of you can't have a minimum wage job and afford childcare and a home and everything else that is minimally essential to survive. And I think I mean, I definitely think it has to do with gender equality, because I just think we land in those positions, whatever institutions were there before. Yeah. Okay, I'll let somebody else talk.
Okay, I've been posting a
Go,
bunch
Chris.
of
Go,
links.
Chris.
Yeah, I've been posting a bunch of links, and on all this stuff that we've been talking about, and there's a 10 hours of research in there. But a couple of things I wanted to ask you guys about. Let's talk about the wage gap, because there is real. It's a real thing, and it's clearly there. I, in my lifetime, have never had to, nor will I ever have to, have a baby. Right? My body's just not going to do it. Doesn't matter what I do. I have unless it's outside of injury or something like that, I have the biological ability, not a privilege, it's just the way I'm wired, to not have kids and go to work every day. Right? You guys have the biological wiring to make kids, and you can't do that at work. You just can't. Right? So the last link I sent from Vox talks about the gender wage gap in China, because I looked at this before, and the wage gap, it almost goes away entirely. Now, at the same time, we have had wage gaps and all kinds of discrimination in our history, and all those things are still woven into our society. But on the present, at the top level, um, what I've seen from other sources, and this one that says the same thing, is that if you take 1,000,000 men and 1,000,000 women and you add up the salary gains that they incur over their lives, women are going to incur less, because they have to stop working at some point in time if they have a kid, even just for the period that they're having the kid and they're on maternity leave. Men, on the other hand, get like what, 2 weeks, and then we have to get right back to work again. We don't have that stop. So just on that one thing alone, there's going to be a gap in salary and gender. There just has to be. You're not getting paid while you're on a kid and you're on an extended
Especially if
maternity
you're
leave.
in, the United States where we don't provide,
Right. If maternity leave was paid full through, I don't think there'd be a gender gap that would be materially interesting. I think it would be an echo of the America we used to be. I mean, I look at Empyrean. I don't know what you guys make, but well, Becky, maybe I know what Becky makes because I'm her boss. But anyways, if you disagree with me, you're super fired. But anyways, um, it would like I was just bragging to somebody the other day that I feel like, looking at Empyrean as an individual microcosm, it appears it is the most distributed workforce I've ever worked at. Whether you look at it from from a gender background or race background or any other kind of thing, I feel like I don't sense it. Katie, Becky, I mean, at Empyrean, do you sense a gender bias aside from the fact that there's Becky, you already know there's certain things that you can't say to the VP of HR without making him feel very uncomfortable in his chair. But aside from that, which is more sport than anything, do you recognize a
Which
gender
was
bias?
on maternity leave, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Or
And that was
about.
topic. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that I think was a money issue on the, yeah, we don't want to drive into that, so we're on live, but you know what I mean. So Katie, Becky, because I know you work with me in the same place and you've been there for a while. What have your experiences been? Do you perceive a gender bias at work?
So, you know me well, Chris. I deal in data and numbers, right? So what I feel and what I know may be two different things. So I don't feel like I'm able to even answer that question because I don't have statistics in front of me to validate what I might feel.
Okay.
What I can say, not about Empyrean, but at a prior employer that I worked for, whose records were leaked to 2020. That company that I worked for literally made it, or 2020 or 60 Minutes. It's one of the two. Long story short, there was a visible, very largely visible gap in pay between not only gender but also ethnicity as well. So I don't want to point out one company or whatever. I think that it does tangibly exist, and I think that there are a lot of us out there. And you're right, like, as a single parent, I do a bazillion car rides here and there and doctor's appointments, everywhere. So I get that to an employer in an objective state. If I can't produce the same amount or the same quality of work as somebody else who can be at work, a straight 8 hours throughout the day, that there's going to be a pay difference. But yet as a woman, I find myself working late nights to make up for the gaps, or getting up super, super early. My day starts at 4 a.m. I work out, and then I come get on the computer and then go take a kid here and then come back. And, the world doesn't reward a woman, in my opinion, in the way that it should, for the amount of biological and non-biological things that we generally do take on. Not to say that men aren't valuable. I don't want to indicate that at all.
Capitalism in the workforce don't reward it, right? Capitalism in the workforce is strictly an exchange of time and effort for money. That's it.
Yep.
And there's no accounting for any level of humanity, at least in American version of those things.
But shouldn't we try to adjust that and change that? Because it sounds like, I'm listening to Katie. She's saying she's waking up at 4 o'clock. Mm-hmm. She's starting her day early. She's mm-hmm. probably going late because she's got to be the one to take the kids here and take the kids mm-hmm. there. But yet that gets penalized in the wage department. Right.
I'm a single parent. By the way, I'm a single parent too. Yeah. So everything that Katie struggles with, I struggle with as well. It's not gender.
And I agree with that. But I'm just saying, but for statistically, right? Maybe not for you and maybe not for Katie specifically, but statistically, women overall are going to make less money. Right. And I get that we can have babies and men can't. But as Katie was saying, even just in her own example, it's a lot of times we're doing more. It's just that we're not doing it in a way that the capitalistic society is saying we should get paid for. In fact, we're getting penalized for it, right?
And our kids are getting penalized for it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of us feel like in order to have a normal house, I live in a nice house, but it's not extravagant by any means, right? It's a 2-story house. I've got a bedroom for each of my 3 kids and myself, whatever. My kitchen is not up to date, but it's, long story short, it's a 2-income, it's a 2-income household world these days. So just to like keep up with things, it's like you feel like as a parent, now you have to shuffle your kids off to daycare. Both parents have to work. It becomes this whole thing just to be able to provide a structured and decent life for your kids financially, make sure they have everything that they need. And then at the same time, we're, feeling like we might not be getting paid equal dollars for equal work because there's this stereotype that, yeah, I have to take my kids to the doctor. And more than likely, I'm generalizing here, but more than likely mom is, still today the one taking the kids to the doctor. So I have to take off work, but whoever's hiring me or managing me may see that as, oh, well, they're constantly taking off, once a month to go to the doctor or whatever, but they're not necessarily accounting for the fact that you're logging on late at night or early in the morning to make up those hours and make sure that you're still producing at the same level. So it's just this like catch-22 all around for everybody involved.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I'm kind of not a peer of you guys and ladies. I'm on the other side of that. I hadn't had a job since 2000. I'm an entrepreneur, so it's like I'm hearing a personal life and a employee life getting intertwined, and I feel like I'm hearing a lot of choices. Like, I know I've talked to bosses that hired people that came in and interviewed. They was perfect on the interview, and once they hired them, they found out that the person was allergic to fish, and the boss had to almost rearrange his whole work environment as far as people bringing in fish for lunch and stuff like that, because he wasn't allowed to even ask the employee during the interview if they had some type of illness or disability or anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's against the law for him even to ask those type questions. So now he hiring this new person. He gave them a certain salary, and they're really costing him more money pretty much than what they're actually bringing in. So it's like a double-sided. And then you were saying that you log on late at night. Well, some people don't work in offices where they can log on late at night. Some people work in like factories and different places where they only got 8 hours to produce a certain amount of product. And once they 8 hours are up, they can't come in early or late. So it's like, we talking about statistics that's all the way across the board. We're not just talking about like office work or a certain industry. Did any of that make any sense?
No, that's a great
Makes a lot
point.
of
I
sense.
mean, it's a huge point for anyone who's in a service industry. And you're right, you have 8 to 5 or night shift or whatever it may be. Your options are extremely limited. And then as a single parent, male or female, you're really up to Fifth Creek.
So you as an individual, you have this life. You only have one life. If it's either going to be a one male life or one female life, and today 2021 in LGP, whatever the letters are, life to live. So you go to school and you got the student debt and you apply for this job. If that job not paying you, you can quit and you can upgrade your life, but it's going to take self. You can't, like, only job I know that you really can't just quit is the military without consequences. So if if you're a female and you get a job and it's not paying you fair, then it's up to you as an individual to rearrange your life in order to find a better paying job, open a business, do something. It's not, everything don't lie in the boss or your employer lap, is what I'm saying.
Those are great points.
Oh,
Choices
yeah.
are definitely something that we are afforded and need to take advantage of.
So let me
The
ask.
other-
Let me put it in the form of a question for all the three ladies in this way. Then, if you have two employees, so who let's set gender aside, and one of them has no kids, isn't married, that's just them, right? And they are able to dedicate their entire self to job, because it's literally all they do. And then there's another person who is, let's pick the furthest example. They're a single parent of multiple young children, and so they are doing their best to balance work and kids at the same time, which is a humongous challenge. The likelihood is that that person who is just throwing themselves at work is going to get ranked exceeds all the time, and that person who is trying to balance work and other things, while noble and valuable to society, is probably going to get meets expectations at best on the reviews on the regular basis, because that other guy is able to just tear it up. That's gender aside. That person who might be tearing it up at work might be a female, right? They're just able to do it. So does does work alone, let's set any kind of government involvement or anything like that aside, so we're not talking about free daycare, any of those sorts of deals, does work alone owe anything different to the person who is raising the kids versus the person who's not?
No, not. I would say no.
So those people are going to make materially different, they're going to get promoted different, and in those two scenarios I decided, in the world we live in, the single bust your butt, not married, not taking care of kids, if we extend it out over 300 million people, there's going to be more guys in that category than women for a million reasons. Some are good, some are not so good. And on the side of trying to work and raise children at the same time, for good reasons and bad reasons, there's going to be more women in that category. We agree?
Well, I agree, but I don't agree. I agree with you based upon the way we've set up the system, right? The way we
Uh-huh.
set up the system, I absolutely agree with you on that. That's exactly what would happen. But that doesn't mean that's how it has to happen, right? That's just the way we've created the system for it to happen. Because the reality of it is that someone dedicating their entire life to a job, why is there so much honor in that, right? Because more than likely they're neglecting their family, they're neglecting their spouse,
No,
they're
I remember
neglecting.
I said they have no spouse and they have no kids.
Okay, okay, they're neglecting potential relationships though, right? And
You're
let's
gonna
just
you're
so
gonna criticize somebody
their
because they're not
entire
dating.
heart is they want to just
Or,
work. That's all
or
they
they're
want to do is
neglect,
work.
I
Maybe
think
they
you
want
can.
to.
Hold on. I
They
think you
want
can.
they're
to.
neglecting their own
This is
health.
supposed to be common ground. We're supposed to listen.
I think you can dedicate. You don't have to dedicate your life. I think in 8 hours or 12 hours, you dedicate that 8 hours and that 12 hours. Home and work should be separated. Like you could have 10 kids at home, but when you clock in, if you're there on time, that's why I stopped at three. I stopped at three kids because I didn't want to dilute whatever I was going to build in life by 4 or 5, 6 or 8. So I stopped at three. That way I could, you know what I mean? That was my child. That was my birth control. When I got to three kids, I stopped because I couldn't let so many kids interrupt my career life. Like we got to separate home from work. Like because somebody decided to have kids or had three bad relationships and got or had a bad relationship and got three kids and they single parent, your boss may be a single parent. You got to separate your personal life from your career.
And I agree with you on that, Elliot. But I guess to address what Chris was saying, my thing is why should if the job is eight to five, and you got one person who wants to dedicate their entire life to the job, and you got another person who's
What's the
married, they have
definition?
kids.
What's your
Wait a minute.
definition of entire life?
Well,
Dedicate.
because the way Chris's example, it was like one person had the freedom to basically give their life to the job,
They
whereas
go
the
in early,
other
they stay
person
late.
had to balance sort of their family and children with the job,
Mhm.
right? But if you go to this, if it's an 8 hour day and both parties are going to work for their 8 hours and they're doing their job, why should the one who has the ability to maybe work an extra 5 hours be so much compensated more than the person who's just committing their time period because that's what they all they can do because they got kids.
Because they create more product, don't they?
Yeah, I agree with
They
that.
create more value in the marketplace. They should be compensated more. On the other side of it, let's say that person who has kids doubles down and completely destroys it, and they dedicate their lives to work, and they just have grandma watch the kids, and the person who's got absolutely nothing going on just works 8. Should that person who's completely busting their butt and grandma's watching the kids not be compensated for killing it?
Yeah.
Sure they should.
So I think Elliott's hit, and he hit on this very early on, right? We're all making choices, right? And we're choosing to dedicate our time, our effort to something or someone or a group of someone's, right? And that energy in and effort in comes back to us in whatever realm we're dedicating that energy to. I think the interesting thing that as a woman, and I think maybe Becky and Shon, I'll be interested to hear your points on this, and Chris and Elliott as well. But as a woman growing up, nobody talked to me about college. I mean, I graduated in 2000. That's far enough along in the future that we live in today to think that somebody should have talked to me about college. And when I came home at just barely 19, mind you, I was engaged at 17, and at 19, just married, and then now I find out I'm pregnant. My parents are over the moon excited, and yet I'm panicking inside because I just signed up for my first semester of college and like all these things. And it's like, my mind is telling me I know I have something to offer the world. I love being a mom. I love parenting my kids, and I want to do that, and I engage and enjoy that 150%. But my brain also, I learned very early on that stay-at-home parenting it's not good for me, and it's not good for my kids because it's not good for me. And me being engaged in work actually helps me be a better parent. But yet society, my parents, my family, they literally, my mom was offering me family, like her grandmother's diamonds so that I could cash it in and not go to work. Like, this is craziness. Craziness. And I like, no, why would I give up my life to do what they want me to do? Number one. And number two, like, what is it about me being a woman that says I have to stay home, thereby not being able to go into the workplace right after I graduate, thereby to Becky's point, I'm gathering this student loan debt that I can't pay off as fast as somebody else. It's like this do. It goes down, down, down. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. Chris is like, I've never heard any of this personal stuff from Katie. You put me on a radio show, you're gonna get it all.
No.
One of the things that I've been wanting to say for a while that I think we've all kind of touched on without really calling it out, and I would think that we would probably all agree this is very similar to the ethnicity conversation, right? There's also a generational problem here, right? Whatever generation, my husband's grandmother, grandpa died a couple of years ago, and literally the first thing she said to me is she's like, I don't know what to do with myself. I've never had to take care of myself. My parents always took care of me. I got married at, 16, and then my husband took care of me. I've never had to work a day in my life. I stayed home and I watched kids. I am now 80 plus years old, and this is the first time in my life I've been on my own and had to take care of myself. And then, you have my family where my granny and Pap, my Pap was a teacher and he was a park ranger. We're from the mountains up in West Jefferson. My granny worked in a factory and sewed quilts and all this stuff. And they had, 6 kids, and they were poor, but they worked. They both worked as much as they could. And it's like those are totally different backgrounds to come from, and then my mom, they were also very poor, to the point to where I'm like, I'm airing this live. Sorry, Mom. But like, they were worried that all of them were going to be able to eat at some point in time, right? And for my mom, going to college meant, well, actually, she enlisted in the Army because her choices were, I enlisted in the Army, and that's how I can go to school. And she became a nurse. Or I can't afford to go to college, so I either don't go to college, or I take some job, which back then, there's a lot more gender inequality back then. But again, I think there's this generational thing, right? Like both of my parents went to college, so all like it was, and not all three of us, not all three of the kids went to college, but two of us did, and it wasn't. And Katie, to your point, no, like actually, my oldest sister and I just had a conversation with my dad about this. We were like, yeah, you guys didn't set us up at all for that. It was just like, I remember it was senior year, and my friends were like, oh, I got into UT, I got into A&M, I got into U of H. Where'd you get into? And I was like, we're supposed to be applying to colleges right now.
That was me.
I was like, oh, I guess. And I happened to have a friend who was going to Blinn, so she was like, hey, come go to Blinn and we'll roommate together. And I was like, okay. If that hadn't happened, I mean, I don't know. Like it wasn't, and then there's some families, with kids my age, and like their parents were the first in their generation to go to college. So I'm sure that has a huge impact on, well, you have to go to college. Like, we're your grandpa couldn't go to college, or your grandma couldn't go to college, like it's, so there's generational stuff there too. And a lot of it's gender, and a lot of it's other stuff that has nothing to do with gender. And I think that's part of the problem as well. Like Shon, like you said earlier, like there's archaic stuff in lots of the system, all of the systems that just continue to keep things unbalanced. And there's just so many factors that tie into everything that it's difficult to know how to fix that, or to say why the statistics are the way they are. I don't know. I guess I'll stop there.
But no, I think you make a good point, Becky, because I think the point that I want to make, and I think it's tying into what Chris was saying too, when he gave the example. What is this intersection? Because on one hand, if we follow Chris' example about work and having the two different workers, right? When you look at that example in isolation, one can work because they don't really have commitments, family, children, etc., and one does. What's that intersection between, is it just work and it's not inequality? It has nothing to do with gender? Or is something dealing with gender inequality, and we're just, now we can sort of cover it with work, right? Because now it's like, okay, if you can't work and you can't perform, then you're not getting equal pay, not because you're female, but you just don't perform, right? But then if your performance is tied to the fact that you have other obligations, right, that maybe somebody else doesn't, right? Or if, let's say, let's think about, I think there's another statistic with regards to like very, 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 very wealthy people, like the top 1-2%. They're mostly men that are the billionaires, right? And so I think that on one hand, I would love to be able to say that gender inequality or racial inequality, but we're talking about gender today, it doesn't really exist, but it does exist, and it exists in the fabric of our existence, right? It exists in the fabric of how we think about things, how we think about ourselves, and how we think about each other, right? Because nobody's going to tell me Katie couldn't run a multi-billion-dollar company. I know she could, right? But Chris would get a greater opportunity to run that company than Katie. Then, I mean, that's just facts,
Well,
right?
until I interviewed for the job.
That. I'm sorry, Chris, what'd you say?
Until I interviewed for the job, I would not do well in corporate leadership.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Elliott.
NBA, WNBA. Male music artists, female music artists. I mean, about 2 female music CDs or cassettes in my whole lifetime.
Shame on you.
But I listen to the music and I like the music. WNBA, NBA. I may watch a WNBA game if I flip a channel. NBA game. It's a pay. It's a difference in pay in WNBA and NBA. The NBA bring in way more revenue than WNBA. But would it be fair for a woman to say that it's a gender is inequality in the pay?
Of course, we ask a question that directly under the facts as they exist as today. You're right. It would be unfair for a woman to do that. But I think you cannot just go about what is existing today. You got to look at what has been built up over time to get us to today, right? That's
Well,
what
let's
that's what I'm.
but
That's
let's
what I'm
ask the
saying.
question though:
It's
should
a
a
good.
should a professional basketball player in the WNBA make as much money as a professional basketball player in the NBA? Are
So I
those
think.
equal jobs?
So I mean, functionally doing the same thing, right?
Mhm.
But to the business side of it, if the WNBA is only packing 10,000 fans, right, and whatever TV ratings are, much lower than what the NBA is pulling in, then you have a certain amount of money going into that business, right? It's the same thing as Coca-Cola and Pepsi in my mind in that regards, because if Coca-Cola is run by women and Pepsi is run by men, it's not about the gender at that point, it's the business at that point and how much they are able to sell. And if the WNBA is not selling as much, then they don't have as much to pay out to their employees, the female basketball players. That's how I see that.
The
It's
WNBA,
unfortunate, but
just to put the
So
numbers out there, the WNBA annual revenue, this is a report as of April 7, 2021, was $60 million a year. The NBA makes 7.92 billion
yeah,
compared to 60 million. It's the difference
big difference.
between like a defense attorney, right? Like a civil like a, what do you call a public defender, and like a high profile corporate lawyer or something like that. Roughly the same job, same bar they had to pass, right? Same degree, but they applied themselves in very, very different industries and they make different money as a result of it.
let,
So
let
Now,
me
then,
give you
do we really
let,
have gender inequality then? So
let, let,
so is it that we don't really actually have gender inequality today?
How do you just define it? How would you define gender inequality
No,
in isolation?
we'll let Elliott make his
Okay.
point, then we'll come back to it. Go, Elliott. Sorry, I cut you off.
the University of South Carolina, the Gamecocks, the ladies basketball team, when Coach Staley first got there, you could get a ticket to the game with a value meal from McDonald's. Like they was giving tickets to the churches, trying to get people to come into the ladies games. They start winning. They start packing the gym. So they almost bringing in as much money as the football team now. The pay went up.
The name of the women's team is the Gamecocks.
Yeah, University of South Carolina Lady Gamecocks.
so on
She,
that note, though,
Yikes.
how many of y'all have seen? I've seen this video maybe two different kinds of ways or whatever, but it's explaining privilege, right? So it's like a bunch of kids lining up on a line, and it's like, all right, if your parents are divorced, if your parents are still married, take a step forward, right? And then obviously there's some kids that are stepping back, right? If your parents own their own home, take a step forward, right? We've all seen this, right? Or you get the concept. And at the end of the day, there's a lot more kids standing back behind that don't have the same privileges as the kids standing in front of them.
And it's
Is
white
it,
kids in the
is it
front. Right?
because of their race, their gender or whatever, or is it all of these multiple things that restricts them from having that same opportunity, that same privilege? I think that's what happened with basketball, right? In most sports, right? Women weren't allowed to be in sports in the very beginning, right? And this goes back to what Shon was saying, like the constructs that were there before are still allowing privilege for the male gender in a way that it's not happening for the female gender. So it's go ahead.
Can I ask a question? And this is specifically to Chris and Elliott, and to Becky and Shon for your male friends thinking in their shoes. If as a man, you are a big fan of the Texans and you want to go to the game, but girlfriend or wifey over here is like, she's just kind of tagging along, you're buying 2 seats to that game, right? And girlfriend or wifey may not be really wanting to go watch the game, but she wants to spend time with husband and she's going to the game. So you buy 2 tickets, right? Reverse it. Wifey wants to go to the Lady Gamecocks game. How likely is she going to be able to convince her boyfriend or her hubby to go to that game? Just wondering.
I would go.
Okay.
You know how many times I've been to Hobby Lobby? Just a cart full of pillows. We don't need.
Yeah. I don't know. I've dated a few people in my life that would be like, no, not happening. But I'll take you to a baseball game. Like, no, thanks.
I will say that within
on that
our
same
gender,
token, Katie, how often, and we'll just talk about how the ladies went to the bathroom at the same time. How often would you probably get 5 or 6 of your girlfriends to go with you because your significant other doesn't want to go?
So I think that's a great counter question to my question. I think when we're talking about gender inequality with sports, we're going to have a certain theme going on, right? And here goes the stereotype. How many women are truly sports fanatics compared to the percentage of men that are sports fanatics?
It's a lot now today.
I know.
It's a lot
of women sports fanatics.
It's a lot, but how many of them are as likely to go out and buy season tickets to their favorite female team?
How many are likely going to pay for dinner on a date?
I'm just trying to point out. I'm trying to point out, like, I think there's more to it. You're right. That's a great question. How many of us are likely to pay for dinner? Some of us maybe. Most of us are probably like, no, he's paying for that dinner.
I really didn't want to get there on this.
No, it's fine. That's what the conversation's all about.
I would
Remember I said we had more overhead?
What? We have more overhead.
No, hey.
We have more overhead.
Yeah.
See all this hair?
Okay, wait a minute, y'all. Wait a minute, y'all. Y'all do understand that y'all are feeding stereotypes and norms, right? You're feeding them. You really are, right? Going out to dinner.
I think it's a head start.
Out to dinner, I can pay for my own dinner. You can pay for your own dinner.
No.
I can pay for my own dinner.
You choose to pay for my dinner, that's great. But I shouldn't default think that just because I go out to dinner with a man, that a man got to pay for it. And a man shouldn't default.
But over 300 million people, there are more women that think that dinner is going to get paid than are not going to get paid. Over 300 million. I do have some statistics, by the way, before we leave the sports thing. Statista, I guess, is the website.
We got you.
39% of men versus 12% of women report as avid sports fans. But
39 versus how many?
39% versus 12%
of women.
Men to women avid sports fans. I'll put the link up. But here's the interesting thing. 45% of men rank themselves as a casual sports fan. 49% of women, more women than men, rank themselves as casual sports fans. All that says to me is that women just have more diverse hobby sets than men do.
Or maybe they have more things that they're expected to take care of. And they have less time in many situations to become sports fanatics.
Well,
I'm just saying, I know a lot of women.
That was sexist.
I know a lot of women who are expected to cook, clean. Husbands don't want them working. Like,
that was sexist.
It's true.
That's sexist.
It's true. They choose that life now. They choose that life, right? Elliott, to your point, we are all making choices.
Well,
we all make the choices, but I'm going to be controversial and call it out.
But Katie, is it really a choice?
Katie, look what you did to the discussion.
Hold on, wait a minute, Katie.
Listen, let me.
Katie, is it really a choice though? Is it really a choice?
It is.
But if I think that I can only be a good housewife, and in the back of my mind, that is that is the only thing that I really think that I'm gonna be really good at in my life. And I found a nice man. I love him. He loved me, and I'm committed to just being a good housewife, right? But come on,
Your perception, you're right.
is
Your
that really a
perception is
choice?
limiting your insight into the choices that are logically in front of you. So you
Okay.
think you don't have choices when in actuality you do. And I think that's why it's so important for us to have these kinds of conversations and for other women to listen in to realize, hey, I do have a choice. And
Let me
Can I
yeah.
say something real quick?
Go ahead, Elliot.
I think that men do have a hits. We got to jump on women, and we got to go back way, way, way back. I think women now are starting to gain on us, but we do have a jump, and we got a head start, and that goes from the agenda to race. So it's very similar to the race issue. You know what I mean? So, and the first thing I have to admit as a man is that we do have a head start. We do have a jump. So it's just men have to be willing to admit that and help where we can. But we can't do all the work for you ladies. You
you're right.
ladies have to market and you have to market yourselves and you have to do work also. But we also, as a man, we also got to say, you know what? Yeah, what can we do to help? But we also have to keep our feet on solid ground too. So we can throw a life. We can throw a life vest, but we can't throw the boat. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I agree
Absolutely.
100%.
I throw you a float, but I can't throw you the boat. You know what I mean?
When Rochelle and
I
I
like
got
how that
married,
rhymes too. But and also, Chris, just because you like statistics,
Mhm.
I would like to see the minimum wage jobs. Right? We were saying that women hold more of the minimum wage jobs. Like I would be
Yeah.
interested to
Oh.
interested to see the industry of minimum wage. Right? Like
Sure.
uh,
I bet we could guess why. I do want to come back to something though on the working thing, but I bet you can guess why. So the jobs that are high paying versus jobs that would be minimum wage, right? If somebody is balancing very important other priorities in their life other than work, what jobs are going to be more available to them? Part-time, different shifts, right? Things like
Yep.
that.
And that's what
Doesn't
that's what the article says too, Chris.
Yeah,
Exactly what you
it
just
doesn't
said.
surprise me
Yeah.
at all that there are more women in lower paying because those shifts are like I can't be a part-time CEO of Apple. This just doesn't work, right? But here's the thing I wanted to ask. So Rochelle and I, we got married, and for 12 years we had no kids. She had a job, I had a job. Now, as I have mentioned in prior conversations, I chose technology over girls in school. And so from 12 years old on, that was my focus. And that is still my focus fundamentally in my career, even to this day. Right. So I have done basically since I could produce information, I've been doing one thing. And so after 12 years of marriage, we both worked for Fidelity Investments, same company. But she had worked at a Chinese food restaurant, she worked at my grandparents' restaurant, she worked for a university for a while. I worked technology. This is all I did for decades now. That's all I've done. And so when it came to adopting kids, and we had an active discussion of how are we going to balance this? What are we going to do? Well, how much does Chris make? How much does Rochelle make? Well, Chris has been doing one thing for 30 years, and he makes this much. Rochelle has bounced around 5 different careers for a variety of reasons, some of it her choice, and she makes this much. So Chris is going to go to work, and Rochelle is going to stay home and take care of the kids. Now, we can say, okay, Chris had the advantage, but here's the point I wanted to make. Do you know how many children's museums, how many field trips, how many picnics at the lake, how much amazing quality time? Go look through. My wife on our like our local drive has like literally a quarter of a million pictures. Go look at all the field trips and count the number of times I was in them. My work isn't always an advantage. The fact that I can earn more and go to work isn't an advantage. I sacrificed many hours with my kids that I would have much rather done that my wife got to do because she made the choice to stay home. It almost makes me emotional thinking about it now of how much of their little life, the Lego life, all those little kid years I missed because I was sitting in a cubicle earning $100,000 a year and my wife was at home experiencing our kids.
So Chris, so it sounds like what you're saying, because I agree with you, that touches me just to hear you say that the common ground here when we think about or talk about gender inequality specifically, because that's what we're talking about now, we really got to think about it in totality, right? They didn't make now I do think gender inequality, some of it is based in traditions and norms that were put in place a long time ago that make no sense. However, when you have some of the more traditional relationships that are created from those traditional norms, then those norms actually work, and it's not gender inequality. Because if I marry someone and I say I'm gonna be the stay-at-home mom, I'm gonna work part-time to be at home with the kids, to do things like that, and you're gonna be the breadwinner, then that's an agreement that we've made. And so that there's no inequality in our specific relationship because we designed that relationship to fit that model. That model worked for us, right? So in that respect, there is no gender inequality under those conditions, right? We would agree or not agree?
I would agree. If we're defining equality as everybody having the same experience and the same opportunities and the same consequences and costs, it's that I don't think that it the experience of one person is not going to be the experience of another. And we do divide work sometimes by gender because families come together usually with two different genders, not always, right? So in a case of a same-sex relationship that has kids, there's no gender inequality, but one of them's going to be taking care of the kids probably, and one of them's going to be working probably.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. I
Well,
agree with
and
that.
the other thing too that I was thinking, so the point that I brought up about generational, but how much of it is also just cultural? Like how much of this is unique to the United States, right? There's a lot of other cultures where that's this is not how they operate, right? It's like I remember my sister-in-law was talking about how she worked with a company where their headquarters were in like Europe or something like that, and it's like we're over here in the United States on conference calls, and Jack was like, oh yeah, I just got back from my vacation for a month, where it was in some cases like required, like, hey, you didn't take your month off, your sabbatical or whatever. It's the United States is known for like exactly what we're talking about, like work yourself to death. Work is more important than anything else. And there are companies where the employee who actually makes it a point to go take those doctor's appointments and take care of their family, like there are employers and there are companies where they're like, do that. Like, I'm not going to penalize you for that because I understand this. The statistics show me that if you can live your life not worried about if you're going to get fired or paid less or penalized for doing what you need to do, you're going to put more when you are working. You're going to be worth a lot more to me than somebody who's working 50, 60 hours a week and they're burnt out. Like, there's also a huge cultural problem here that has nothing to do with gender, but just that's how we in the United States, that whole, I'll say the word capitalism, Chris.
It's a whole other common ground.
Yeah, that's a different discussion right there.
Yeah,
And I agree.
yeah.
I agree with you on that, Becky. I totally agree with you on that.
The thing I can't believe you guys didn't hook on, and I'm really disappointed in you as a gender, really, fundamentally, is that the Marines canceled underwear money, but gave money to women to buy high heels.
Did you not see Katie's face when you
I
said that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
but
can
we
I buy a skirt too? Like,
I thought there would be more. I read it and I was like, oh, this is just fuel on the fire. Like swing and a miss, Marines.
yeah.
Swing and a miss.
But that said, the military is, I was Googling it on the side while we were talking earlier, the military does truly have equal pay for gender. So whatever your rank is, you get a dollar amount for that rank regardless of your gender, which makes sense.
So they're ahead of the game in pay, but they're not ahead of the game in things like sexual assault.
Well, yeah.
Maybe the next topic.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
that yeah. If you take a bunch of young men and you give them guns and you make them do things that it's almost like you're concentrating a risk group into one area. Do you know what I mean? Not to slight on the military men in any way, but if you take a bunch of 18-year-old, I'm gonna call them boys. I was one too. At 18, I was not a man. I don't care what the legal statutes say. At 18, I was not a man. If you take a bunch of 18-year-old boys and you put them someplace far away from home, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. It's just you have isolated a demographic of trouble and put them all in one spot away from their mamas, and they're going to do something stupid.
Well, but a lot of the sexual assault, we're talking about the leadership, right? It's your generals or your, like, I'm going to sound stupid or whatever, but it's men in position of power where it's not necessarily the soldier right next to me, right?
Sure. So now you've got the
higher
governor.
rank.
Anyone
Governor
been in the
Cuomo
military?
problem.
Anybody on here been in the military?
No, I did the whole ROTC thing back in the day, but never made it to enlist.
I was a Boy Scout.
I was in the military. The military is it's like it's a different world. Like, I live here in Columbia, South Carolina, and we have Fort Jackson here. And the military, the soldiers, they don't mix with civilians. Very rarely you will live in a military town and and it will be a soldier with a lot of friends that's civilians. So it's secluded. So anytime you have something that big, it's like a fraternity. You know what I mean? And they have a frat party and somebody get raped. Who's gonna tell on who? They're gonna keep it in hush hush. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it's no different than the WNBA. I'm not getting back on sports when they were saying about the whatever the alphabets are, women and the straight women in the WNBA. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's a sexual discrimination. They have sexual assaults in the WNBA. So in just about every organization there is, they have that same issue. It's just that when we say the military, we think of the military as being squeaky clean, and it's no different. You know, that's it. I mean, I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just saying that's the military. That's next to politicians and politics and government and stuff like that. So, before anything happens in the military, get out to civilians. Trust me, it's out of hand.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And like we were saying, I think you're taking a demographic of men and you're isolating them in one place, and it's just a higher risk factor. It's just a higher risk factor. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It's not a group of people that are broadly educated on just their own issues and circumstances that would lead them down a path of violence, whether it be sexual violence or other. Like in your experience, Elliott, in the military, how much focus was there on individual mental health, wellness?
I mean, go down to your city downtown and see how many homeless people out there, and see how many of them are vets.
Sure,
and that'll answer your question right there.
Yeah. I just don't think it's an environment that it's not an environment that endorses wellness at all. No. And unfortunately, lack of wellness in men will often manifest in sexual crimes. It just does.
Or violent crimes.
Well,
'Cause
I think they're the same thing. You know what I
right.
mean?
So
Either way, it's establishment of power.
I
Mhm.
Right?
was
I
going
want
to
control.
the similarity of the police brutality, right? It's the same thing. It's a tight group of you are a group of people with a lot of power. I feel like the military and the police are very similar in that way. And no, I wasn't in the military, but lots of both my brother-in-laws, my mom, like a lot of friends. So when you said that, Elliot, everything, I was like, absolutely, absolutely. Like I got that.
Let me ask you this: do you think that law enforcement have a sexual abuse issue too?
Probably.
Do we ever hear about it?
Hmm.
It's a lot of
But
stuff we don't
not
hear about, right?
significantly.
Yeah.
A
So that's what
lot
I'm
of
saying. It's
about.
it's what you're saying, right? It's a tight group of people and politicians, right?
Power. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
if you have a lot of power and there's a lot of you together, think about the Epstein stuff, right?
Or Cuomo,
You
like
go
right
down,
now,
I go
literally.
Yeah.
down, we all go down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that so you don't hear it a lot, but it would stun me if we could somehow have the truth of everything in our hands right now. We could just look at the reality of the situation. It would stun me if the law enforcement community at large did not have a good number of female victims that were just not didn't feel safe to report for whatever reason. It would stun me if that wasn't true.
And that could have a lot to do with the percentage of a certain gender in those professions, right?
Sure.
There's a lot more
Sure.
men in the military than there are women. There's a lot more men police officers than there are females.
But
Anytime
one
you
of the
got people trying to climb a ladder, and you have what they call gatekeepers and things like that. Look at Hollywood. Like anytime
Sure.
there's a gatekeeper, and you're gonna have all type of issues, all type of skeletons. You know, I mean that's just my perspective.
Yeah.
No,
I
I
agree.
totally agree. Now, I know we're over an hour, and so I kind of wanted to just do a rundown of some barriers to gender inequality and what we can do to whatever extent there's some inequality, what we can do to sort of even things out. Not necessarily make it equal, but just have that equal
Close the gap.
opportunity. Yeah, but some of the barriers, I think we've kind of already touched on it. We talked about the traditions and norms and stereotypes. I think we just was talking about violence because the percentage of women that are physically abused that's causing some of this inequality is significant as well. Poor learning. Some women are just not told to get education, even though I think that that's statistically got to be changing based upon the whole college statistic. Some dismissive laws or laws that don't really make a lot of sense, like the pink tax at one time, which, Chris, when did the pink tax go away in the Marines? Was that
It's
recent?
recently, like the bill
Recently.
literally just they just the GAO. It was just like this year or
Yeah.
in
So
spring or something.
so
I'd
you
have to go
have
back and find it, but
so you had that law in place all of these years that just finally got terminated, and all of these things are aiding in the inequality. But what are some of the things that we can do to eliminate inequality, gender inequality, to whatever extent it exists? What do y'all think we can do a roundhouse and then kind of close out? You want to start, Elliot?
Um, I had a conversation earlier today at the muffler shop. Um, I think right now, COVID. It might sound crazy. It might sound crazy, but just stay here for a minute. Right now, COVID has helped that gap. You know, a lot of people they talk about the unemployment and the stimuluses, and everywhere you look, they got now hiring signs. People don't want to go to work. It's a large group of people who's turned into entrepreneurs. They done left office jobs. They started driving Uber or door dashing. So a lot of people have gone for self now. So a lot of, as far as women, Now's the time to demand your worth. You get what I'm saying? Like now it's time to walk in that interview or that your job and demand your worth because like the workforce right now is not stable. So I don't know what we can do to bridge the gap, but only thing I can say is demand first, calculate your worth and demand it because like okay, you make 50,000 on your job, or you go drive Uber and make 50,000.
So you're
Which one you
saying
want?
basically we should people should get in touch more with sort of the freedom of being able to live and not be so dictated by I need to go get a job and make a certain amount of money.
Yeah, like the
Okay,
job, job. Don't be so concerned about job.
I
You
got
know
you.
what I mean?
That makes
Just
sense.
be concerned about self and self um what preservation, whatever the word, I'm gonna call it
Preservation.
dropout, whatever the word is. But like calculate your worth. It's a number. What you need, what's that salary, what's that amount that you need? Because you can go get 10,000 bottles of water for $800 and sell them for $1 a piece.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. All right. So, any other final thoughts on that, Chris? Katie, you want to go next? Because I know you got to log off in a minute while we close out. What can we do to whatever extent there's gender inequality? What can we do to lessen the gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I definitely agree with Elliott on is the power of choice. So I think that we have to recognize that we have to stand up for ourselves and understand our own worth. And when it's, especially when we have friends that may not see that, we have to step in and help them see that if and when they're willing to see that or want to see that, and just have more conversations like this. I think we have a lot of differing viewpoints, but I think we definitely found common ground here today on a few of them. So I would say keep talking and stand up for yourself and go from there.
I agree with you. Becky, Chris?
Becky, you can go.
I would say it's been illuminating for me personally to just, and Shon, you're a lawyer, so you'll probably appreciate this, I think, in a different way, but just things like just the article about women enlisting in the draft. Like, I didn't even know that was still a thing until Chris was like, did you know that my son just got a letter in the mail and he's required to sign up for this, right? Because he's a boy and he turned 18, And reading through that article, one of the things I noticed is it was like the draft was instituted, so many years ago for a specific reason, right? World War II, Vietnam. There's so much legislation out there that is inequality, not just gender, but race as well, where it's like it's still just sitting there, right? And we don't know it's sitting there because we just don't know. Like education, I guess is the word I'm looking for, not the college degree that you pay for, but just education of what are the actual laws and the legislations that are holding each of us back in different ways and holding other people back in ways that they don't even realize. And I think I started to really see that with healthcare because once I had gone into the industry and once I saw how health legislation impacted me individually, and then thinking about things like this pink tax or whatever, it's like there's these laws and we just say they're just written somewhere, but we follow them, right? Like there are still women who pay more money for clothes than men in the military because of a law that was written in a certain way that had to have said men. It had to have had the word man. And it's just all we had to do was maybe just scratch that word out and we wouldn't have the amount of inequality that we do because of archaic legislation that we're not looking at, we're not reviewing it, we're not saying how is this still making things in not equal for everybody, not whatever it is. But yeah, I just think knowing what the legislations are that are really impacting people in a real way, then we just think that, they're just words on a paper somewhere in a building, but they're impacting our lives every day, and we don't realize it because we just don't know.
Yeah, 1000% agree with you on that one, Becky. Absolutely. Chris?
So there's been a couple of things that have really caught my thoughts as we've been talking about all this stuff, and I think one of the they're both related, and they reminded me of a quote from Dave Chappelle from a recent not super recent but kind of recent special he did. I'll read it in a second, but in that I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning with the conscious thought of I'm gonna hold down somebody else today. I'm gonna hold down this person because of their gender or because of their color or because of their social status or because of whatever it is. I think people end up doing that because the circumstances that they're in compel them to think that that's the choice they have to make, and that I think that they're within the context of victims and perpetrators. There's an awful lot more victims altogether, right? Even the people that are doing the things we don't like. If you were to back up and try and diagnose, that's why I asked about wellness in the military, right? If you take a bunch of young men who are not mentally well and you put them into an environment, what do you expect them to do? To just suddenly, become thoughtful, deep thinkers? It's not going to happen, right? They haven't been taught the skills, and the things that they have been taught are counter to wellness in the first place. Go out and kill things. I mean, I don't understand even how that makes a balanced person. So Dave Chappelle was talking about the Me Too movement, and he said, "Ladies, I want you to win this fight, but fear doesn't make a lasting peace." I'm cutting over here. You've got to have men on your side, and I'm telling you right now, you're going to have a lot of imperfect allies, and I think that's what we are. The five of us here, and broadly, I think the men and the women in America and people of all different races, we are all imperfect allies if we choose to see each other as allies, right? But if we choose to see each other as villains, and Katie, when you said wifey, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, right? Because I know the tone you mean with that word, right? And like, but we are allies collectively at the end of the day. We are our own hurts and our own damage and our own wounds into this. And we look at each other and we have a choice. Do I see somebody who I can empower to stand beside me? Or do I see somebody who, through a different kind of actions, I can empower to work against me? I have that choice, right? I could have come into this and been a flaming jerk and turned every single one of you women against me today by the words I said, right? I could have, right? I could have come out a demon in this because I could have just said really terrible things. But we come to this with an attempt to meet common ground, and I think that's the opportunity that we have as an American society, whether it's this or politics or any other thing, is to see each other as imperfect allies.
Yeah. Well, I love that term, imperfect allies. If we started to see each other as imperfect allies, as opposed to enemies or villains, etc., then some of the inequalities that we know are there, we can bridge that gap by, as Becky was saying, understanding some of this legislation that's on the books that's actually having impact today. These are legislation that was put in place a long time ago, and also understanding through not only physical wellness but mental wellness that you have the right to make better choices, right? And then that way you don't have to necessarily go get the job, as Elliott was saying. You can sit there and calculate what your value is and decide that, okay, I can do something that's more freeing for me. Go drive in an Uber or do Instacart or something like that, or create my own little business as opposed to going to get a job that's going to dictate my schedule.
Or
So I
raise
think those are
amazing
all of
kids,
those
right?
things help. What'd you say, Chris? I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry to interrupt, but or raise amazing kids, right? That's a job too. That's a big job.
Absolutely. Actually, somebody actually commented. They said, "Raise your sons right, so your daughters don't have to deal with it." I think that's a good way to kind of that says it
That's
all right
sexist.
there. That says it all right there. Raise your sons right, so your daughters don't have to deal with it. But I think you definitely need to raise, we need to raise each other right, right, um, so that we'll know that we both have rights to live our best life, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman.
That's right.
All right?
We are at time at 9:00 exactly.
Yes.
I feel like in a non-COVID world, this would be a group hug moment. But nope, not doing it.
All
Okay.
right, guys.
Thank you, Elliott, for coming. We appreciate
Yes.
it.
Elliott,
Sorry.
thank you so much.
I don't know if you knew what you're walking into, but we appreciate that you walked into it.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
guys. We'll
All
see
All
you.
right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.